Okay, I'm really, really excited about this one. Um, so, as I do when I need to prepare a little introduction about somebody, I visit their website. And I click on a few links, and I started getting more excited every link I clicked. I mean, I can just summon all the amazing things that she does and that she's interested in. She started a blog a while ago, which has one blog post, which lists all the things that she wants to write about. And I think, wow, that's incredible. But then, I mean, the work she does, she's a senior software engineer at Etsy, which is probably one of the best companies to work at, probably one of the best companies ever. So, yeah. And then what I think is very interesting, she collaborates with designers to build systems and experience to be creative in a creative and usable way, which is really so hard. I mean, I've been trying this at agencies forever, and I failed, and now I'm a lecturer, right? She didn't fail, she just keeps on doing that. She's passionate about web standards, front-end architecture, style guides, accessibility, and facilitating communication between design and development. In other words, she's my hero. This is just fantastic. There's just one thing that if you go to management conferences, I never attended one, but I imagine that there you get advice on how to ditch the person on the next step of your career to get their seat, right? And this is not what Katie's going to be talking about. It's the other way around. She's going to be teaching you, so how did she say it? Leveling up your career and the career of those around you. We need more Katies. Please give a very warm applause to Katie Sylor-Miller.
Thank you. Thank you. You guys hear me okay? Great. I'm a senior software engineer on the design systems team at Etsy.com, which is a global marketplace where people from around the world connect both online and offline to make, sell, and buy unique goods. So really my job as a design systems engineer is to build tools and systems that enable all of our designers and all of our engineers on our product teams at Etsy to go out and make beautiful websites, apps, and emails. So I spend a lot of time communicating and collaborating across multiple disciplines and multiple teams. So raise your hand if you work completely and utterly by yourself. No one? All right, raise your hand if you work on a team. Now keep your hand up if your team is made out of people from different disciplines. Yeah, so see, we all do this, right? So this is my team. We have members from dev, design, and PM, and we work together on like a daily basis. Now, in the last week alone, working on a single project, I've had to reach out to colleagues on 11 other teams at Etsy. I mean, I work in a pretty large organization where there's a lot of people who specialize in all of the different functions of building and maintaining a website, but communication and collaboration, both within and outside of our teams, is a key part of all of our jobs, right? Most of you had your hand up when I asked if you're on a team and if there's multiple disciplines on it. So the web is made by teams. And I'm here today to talk about how you can be a good teammate and to give you some tactics that you can use to build your skill set as a cross-functional, collaborative innovator. So why is this important? Well, you might have noticed that web development is changing pretty rapidly. Sometimes I feel like this guy. I don't know about you. I've been doing this professionally for about 10 years ago, and things are really, really different. The processes and the technology that we use have changed. And we need a new set of skills to survive and thrive in the new world. So when I started out, lots of companies were following what's called the waterfall method of software development. Has anybody heard of this? A little? Yeah. So waterfall looks like this. So in each step of the software development lifecycle, like each functional team creates an independent deliverable that then gets handed off to the next step in the cycle. So the business analysts start by doing requirements gathering. They bundle that up and they pass that to the designers who make a bunch of Photoshop files. It goes to the front-end dev who make HTML and CSS and maybe some JavaScript to make it like Web 2.0. And then that all gets handed off to the back-end developers who wire everything up. Then there's these like gigantic rounds of QA, and then we finally release the thing sometimes like a year or two after the project started, and usually pretty far behind the initial deadline. So like in this world, there's really clear distinctions between the different job functions. Like people don't work together. You make your thing and you hand it off. And everyone is so siloed that like it's really easy to fall into an us versus them mentality and have like kind of adversarial relationships between all these different functions. Now, thank God we've realized that waterfall kind of sucks. And a lot of tech companies are using various flavors of agile methodology. So like Scrum, Kanban, Lean, extreme programming, etc. So in Agile, instead of these like long, massive projects, we break independent features down into these like manageable chunks. And each feature goes through this entire process of like analysis, design, build, testing, and release, like really quickly in a time-boxed, like short time frame and independently of each other. And Agile teams are usually, but not always, comprised of people from multiple job functions who work together. Now, Agile became a thing kind of like in 2001. A bunch of software engineers got together and published what's called the Agile Manifesto. I highly recommend you go and look at it if you haven't already. But these are the 4 principles that they lay out for building better software. So individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over contract negotiation, customer collaboration, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. Now notice that software is only mentioned once in all of these 4 principles. All the rest are about interpersonal skills. Face-to-face interactions, collaboration, responding to change. We've started to realize that like these people skills matter just as much as great tech skills if you want to ship good software. So coupled with all of these changing methodologies has been a big change in the technology and practices we use to like build the web. So I recently came across this awesome infographic. A front-end developer named Jeff Pelletier went in and took all of the different like libraries, approaches, languages, concepts that he uses that comprise his front-end spectrum. So like one thing to note about this is so he does not know all of these things. Like some of them he uses every day, some of them he uses occasionally, some of them is stuff that he's just like aware of. But I mean, look at all this. Like, how do you manage this? Like what does your spectrum look like in comparison to his? So I feel like we're at this point where it's like, what does it even mean to be a front-end developer today? 10 to 15 years ago, it was super clear, Designers worked in Photoshop, back-end developers worked on the server, and we as in front-end developers, we owned the client. Like we had the browser entirely to ourselves. But things are changing, like JavaScript is on the server. There's not this clear distinction between client and server code. All of these really complicated apps that traditionally would have happened on the server are happening in the client. Designers are moving away from these static comps in Photoshop. They're learning to write code. They're writing prototypes. So this is like, we share the browser now. Not to mention all of the other form factors and IoT devices and everything else that like we have to account for today when we work. Now more than ever, the web is a holistic enterprise. So we really need to have like a multidisciplinary mindset to solve these complex problems that are facing us today. So how are we going to do that? Start with INT, which not information technology, but INT-shaped people. So what does it mean to be an INT-shaped person? So an I person has a really deep knowledge in a single functional area, which is kind of represented by this like vertical stroke of the I. And traditionally, education, and especially engineering education, has focused on producing people with like hard skills in an I shape. And remember waterfall, like world of the I shape. T-shaped person, on the other hand, has 2 characteristics. They have really deep expertise in their domain, plus they cross the T with the ability and desire to collaborate across multiple related disciplines. So a T person has hard skills plus soft skills. Now we're living today in the world of the T. Which one are you? One thing to remember, there is no I in team, but hey, look, there's a T right there. So in the last decade, like I'm not the only one saying this, like leaders in business and education have come out and said, we need T-shaped employees. Just earlier this year, the World Economic Forum, they went out and surveyed a bunch of like major employees regarding the skills that they think are going to be the most important job skills to have in 2020. And their findings were that social skills such as persuasion, emotional intelligence, and teaching others will be in higher demand across industries than narrow technical skills, such as programming or equipment operation and control. In essence, technical skills will need to be supplemented with strong social and collaboration skills. Educational institutions all around the world are kind of realizing the importance of these T-shaped people, and they're changing the way that they teach engineering to create them. All the stars on the map, this is just ones that I could find from like a Google search of schools all over the world that like explicitly say I'm making T graduates. For like the last probably 60 years, engineering has been really focused on producing these I-shaped graduates who have like a depth of expertise in a single skill, because knowledge used to be really rare. It was hard to know things. You had to go to school. But now, as the Dean of Olin College of Engineering, Richard Miller, which is in my home state of Massachusetts, yay. So after the widespread establishment of the internet and powerful free search engines like Google, finding facts has become immensely cheaper and easier. The intrinsic value of knowing things has declined drastically and permanently. To a large extent today, it matters much less what you know than what you can do with what you know. Like, think about that, you need to know how to take information from multiple sources and synthesize it to come up with these like new and innovative solutions that we need to solve all of the complex problems that face us today. You need to be able to build consensus around your ideas. Like, you need to be a T. So I've been talking a lot about T's, and so now let's talk about how do you cross your T? Like, what are some like actual things that you can go out and do to be a more T-shaped person? I did all the hard work for you. You don't have to do it. I read like dozens of articles and research papers and all that. So this is kind of like the traditional I-shaped front-end developer. And remember, you start out with an I, and then you cross your T. So a T-shaped front-end developer has a strong foundation, but they have these soft skills with empathy at its core that allow them to be boundary-crossing innovators. So empathy, communication, collaboration, curiosity, creative problem solving, and adaptability. Now you might be looking at this list and thinking like, come on, Katie, these are all like innate traits that you either have or you don't have, but that's not true. Like all of these things are skills that you can learn and you can develop the same way that you learn a new programming language or a new JavaScript framework. So let's start with empathy, which is the foundation that all these other skills are built on. So what is empathy? So does anybody like remember these ridiculous memes that were popular not too long ago? So the idea is that like each square represents what another person thinks about what you do. So if you're a web designer, like your friends think you're a nerd at a computer all day. Your mom thinks you're painting happy little trees like Bob Ross. Web developers think you're just a kid like scribbling in a coloring book. Your boss thinks that you watch cat videos all day. You think you're the next Andy Warhol, but what you really do all day is just make stupid memes. I really love the like self-referential humor in this one. Anyways, so you laugh, but like this is empathy. The person who made this had to put themselves in all of the shoes that these other people wear to take a look through their eyes and see what they see. And that's what empathy is. Empathy is like walking a mile in another person's shoes. You see the world through their eyes. You're trying to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what's motivating them, and what do they value. So by like stepping outside of ourselves and looking at other people's lives, we can create these more meaningful connections with them, and we can improve our relationships. So if there's only one thing that you remember from my entire presentation, I hope that it's this, which is that behind every design, every business decision, and every line of code is a person. And that person was just trying to do their best with the circumstances that surround them. In our discipline, like I said, in the waterfall days, it's really easy to fall into this like us versus them mindset. How many times have you like gotten frustrated with some decision and rolled your eyes and been like, oh, those idiots in marketing, like they don't understand how the web works. But like really, how can you expect somebody else to understand what you do if you don't take the time to learn about what they do? Like, do you know what pressures they're under or what like considerations they have to balance? Can you really expect them to know? No. Oops. So let's talk about how you practice empathy and some tactics. First, you surround yourself with people who are different than you, both in real life and on social media. Follow people on Twitter who come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different fields, different ethnicities, different gender identities, different physical abilities than you. This past spring, I went to the CSUN 31st Annual International Technology and Persons with Disabilities Conference. So this is this huge conference. Thousands of people come from all over the world to learn about the most recent advances in assistive technology. And a really big portion of the people there are disabled. They're blind, they're low vision, hearing impaired, physically impaired. Like you can see like guide dogs and wheelchairs in the picture. And really, like to be surrounded by all of these people that I don't typically interact with on a day-to-day basis, it was like a shot of instant empathy, like right into my veins. It was awesome. Before I went to CSUN, I knew that accessibility was important, but like actually, having a blind person take my arm and I led them to a conference room that they couldn't find on their own, like that put it into real life for me. It changed how I developed for the web. Like now, every single line of code that I write has accessibility factored into it. And you can do stuff like this too. Another great way to improve your empathy skills is to read fiction books. So how many of you have actually read like the Game of Thrones books? Or just seen the TV show? So this is a great quote by George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones. A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. A man who never reads lives only one. So really, like, fiction is the only way, short of like real telepathy, that you can fully get inside the head of another person and really understand what they're like thinking and experiencing. And maybe books aren't like your thing. You can play video games. Gamesforchange.org. What they do is they go out and like people submit their video games that have like a social component to them. And then you can go on their website and search specifically for games that help to develop empathy. And finally, you need to open up. Empathy is a two-way street. To really, truly practice it, you need to be willing to be more emotionally open, even just a little tiny bit. Now, I'm not saying that this is easy. Practicing empathy can really be quite hard. When you really are actively seeking to understand the world through someone else's eyes, you're challenging your own preconceptions, you're challenging your prejudices, and sometimes that doesn't feel great, But the benefits far outweigh the downsides. We can do this. So in UX, we talk a lot about how we need to have empathy for our users. And it makes sense. Like if you want to build something that a person's going to want to use, you need to understand how they think and how they feel. But let's extend that and practice empathy for our colleagues as well. Empathy is really the foundation of success in today's like global digital connected economy. Teamwork, leadership, communication, creative problem solving, cross-cultural understanding, adaptability, all of these skills are improved if you just practice your empathy. Next, communication. So you remember the Agile Manifesto? Along with their 4 values, they published a list of 12 principles. Again, I highly recommend everybody goes and reads them. And this one is my favorite. The most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. So now I'm a remote worker. My office is in New York, but I live in Boston. And I can tell you that this is like 100% true. All the like emails, the IRC convos, really nothing gets the point across like having a face-to-face conversation with somebody, Even if you're like me and most of your face-to-face conversations happen over like video, but whether you're with your team or you're not with your team, good communication is really key to your team's success. And the key to good communication is active listening. So active listening means actually listening to what another person is saying and not just thinking about what you're going to say in response. Active listening is really empathetic listening. I admit I'm sometimes not really good at this myself. I think everybody does it. But there's 4 really easy tactics that you can use to improve your active listening skills. Number 1 is acknowledge. So when somebody's talking to you, nod your head, say uh-huh, say yes, but don't fake it. People can tell when you're faking it. And how many times have you faked it and somebody asks you a question and you're just like, Nobody wants that. Next is ask. So ask for clarity. Help me understand. Try to understand what the other person is saying. Don't just assume that you get it immediately. Another important part of that is to reflect back. So at the end, say, so what I'm hearing is, and then repeat back to them in your own words what you think they just said to you. And check, go back and forth. Say, did I get that right? And if they say no, then, ask more questions. Go back and forth, figure out what everyone is trying to say, and then defer your judgment until the end. Next up, collaboration. So to learn more about good collaboration, we're going to start with some improv comedy. Improv comedy is a style of theater where a group of players create the action, story, dialogue, and characters for a scene on the fly without any pre-planning. But it doesn't just work, you can't just walk up on a stage and just do improv comedy. There's rules. So the first rule of improv comedy, I think, is the key to collaboration. It's yes and. So yes and means if another actor comes up on stage and says or does something, you say yes, you accept their ideas, and then you add on to it with more detail. So if I come up here and say, gosh, it sure is hot in here, and you say, no, it isn't. That's not funny. It doesn't give the scene anywhere to go. But if you say, yeah, and too bad I left my deodorant at home, then that moves the scene forward. It gives us something to build on. Next time you're in a brainstorming session, try to practice yes and. If somebody else throws an idea out, accept it and then build on it. Make it a better idea. Build on each other's ideas instead of tearing them down. Collaboration is a two-way street. You have to be willing to take the risk of putting your own ideas out there on the table. Share what you know. Wikis, contributing to documentation, even just commenting your code. Your teammates are going to thank you when you share the information that you have when they run into the same problem, or heck, when 6 months later when you're trying to figure out what the heck you were thinking. Commenting your code is great. It helps you, So other people will thank you and you'll thank you. You can't lose. And finally, a fundamental, empathetic collaborative skill is to look for similarities and not differences. So if you're in a heated debate or a contentious meeting, tell everyone, let's pause for a second. Let's rewind. Let's find something that we all agree on and then move forward from there. I guarantee you if you do that, it's going to be easier to make a decision, because if you find something that you all agree on, it's not us versus them. It's us together trying to find a solution. And finally, if you're not in at the beginning of a project to participate in collaboration, you need to invite yourself to those meetings. I don't know how many of you, I've had this happen to me many times where I've been handed a design and somebody says, go out and build this. And I look at it and I'm like, well, this sucks. What happens when they click this button? What happens in this other case? And nobody thought of it? Well, the reason nobody thought of it is because there wasn't a developer there to tell them to think about it in the first place. If you invite yourself to those initial meetings, even though I know, we all don't want to be in meetings all day long, we want to be able to work, but trust me, it's going to make the final result better if you're collaborating from the beginning. All right, next up, curiosity. So this is a selfie taken by the Mars Curiosity rover by NASA. So look at where Curiosity has taken us. Empathy and curiosity really go hand in hand. Curiosity is what drives you to find out more about another person's life. Curiosity is recognizing that you have a gap in your knowledge and having a deep, deep hunger to fill that gap. Has anybody heard of IDEO? It's a design company. They're like a global leader in innovation, and they only hire T people, like very explicitly. And Tim Brown, the CEO of IDEO, has this great quote. We look for people who are so inquisitive about the world that they're trying to do what you do. They are so empathetic that they can branch out into other skills, such as anthropology, and do them well. They are able to explore insights from many different perspectives and recognize patterns of behavior that point to a universal human need. So T-shaped people use their skills in empathy and curiosity to synthesize information. You go out, you learn a bunch of stuff, and then you take it and you synthesize it into a new and better idea. So how do we cultivate our curiosity? Well, I think designers should learn to code and coders should learn to design. We need to learn about each other's disciplines. We should be willing and eager to do what each other does. The more that we learn about each other's fields, that gives us this common language that we can use as a basis for collaboration. You don't have to be an expert in everything. I'm not an expert in everything. I don't think it's really possible to be an expert in everything. But when you have a holistic understanding of what it takes to make a website, the easier it's going to be for you to go out and make great stuff. Another great way to practice curiosity is to go to conferences. Nailed it! We're all here at this conference. You're already super curious people. That's awesome. Remember what I said earlier about surrounding yourself with people who are different than you? So it's also important to read a variety of blogs, a variety of sources. Some of my favorites are Smashing Magazine. Thank you, Vitaly. I don't know if he's up here or downstairs, but Alyssa Part is great too. So both of these, they publish articles that pertain to a really wide variety of topics. Web design, development, content strategy, security, you name it, they talk about it. And it's great because it gives you that perspective into other fields without necessarily having to do it as part of your everyday work life. Finally, really curiosity means taking a risk and trying new things. Experiment and fail. And I know that's not easy. I don't know about you, but I'm super terrified of failure. But the best moments happen if you just put aside that fear and you go out and do it. Learn a new JavaScript framework. Play with blend modes. Go out and do it. But when you're trying something new, don't spin your wheels endlessly because that just leads to frustration. The 15-minute rule is that whenever you're trying something new, you give yourself 15 minutes to get it working. And if after 15 minutes it's not working, go out and ask somebody else for help. Raise your hand. There are no stupid questions, there's only stupid answers. Don't be afraid. Knowing something doesn't mean that you're stupid, it just means that you're curious and that you want to learn. Simultaneously, treat people who ask you questions with kindness and respect. Have a little empathy for them. We weren't all born knowing what we know. At some point, you didn't know the answer to the question they're asking you. So have some empathy for them. Next, creative problem solving. So creative problem solving really means addressing a problem in a new way. So let's do a little bit of design thinking right now. I want all of you to take, we'll do 10 seconds, and think about how you would design an alarm clock. How many seconds? All right, did anybody think? So when I did this exercise, almost everybody started with this, a box with numbers on it and some buttons. And some people got really creative. Maybe they added a touch screen or a Bluetooth connection or a light that turns on to make you feel like the sun is coming up, But essentially it was all a box with numbers on it. Now, what if I told you instead to design a better way to wake people up? What this does is it starts at the problem we're trying to solve, not the solution. Saying, design an alarm clock, we're starting with the solution, right? The problem is, how do you wake people up? And Let's see, how do I play this? So that's like a performance artist. She made this thing, like it's super creative. It's not how I would want to be woken up, but it's a really creative way to wake people up. Framing this as a problem, asking why and not what, you're going to come up with something that's much more innovative when you understand the roots of the problem and why you're asking it instead of the solution. And the last of the T traits I'm going to talk about is adaptability. So in case I haven't said it enough, our industry is changing at a rapid pace. And I don't know about you, but sometimes it feels like there's like a hot new thing every other day. One day Angular's king, next day it's React. But adaptability, the ability to like gracefully respond to change, is going to be necessary for our own sanity. Remember this diagram and all the different things? Being adaptable doesn't mean that you have to be an expert in all of these things. Being adaptable means that when there are changes in your tech stack or changes in your project requirements, changes in a timeline, you're able to calmly pivot and make a change. And the way that you gracefully handle change is to focus in on the fundamentals. So for CSS, like the cascade, specificity, writing semantic and accessible HTML, understanding basic software development patterns like separation of responsibility, design best practices, typography, white space, color. If you have the foundation in all of these things, then you can switch to whatever the new hotness is, Another part of adaptability is your own attitude. Never say this is how we've always done it. Now you don't need to change just for change's sake, but be willing to put aside the past in light of all the new evidence that's in front of you. Anticipate and embrace failure and change. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like the only constant in our job is that things are going to fail and that things are going to change. And you can do everything you can to avoid failure, and it's really important that you do that, but you need to embrace failure because that's how you learn. Everyone fails. It's how you recover from it that matters. And your code and your ideas are not you as a person. And I think this is something that's really worth repeating. And it's something I forget a lot. We're human beings, we have emotions. If somebody comments on your PR and is super negative, you can't help but feel bad. It's something, you wrote this, it's part of you. But it really isn't. We have to let go of it. You have to be able to move on when things change. Phew, so that's it, right? Easy? But honestly, we can do this. We're already starting. We're here. We're curious. We're at a conference. I think front-end developers, we do this already in small amounts just by the nature of the work that we do. But we can get better at it too. You can always get better at anything. Imagine if everyone on your team was T-shaped. Empathy begets empathy. If you're a good collaborator and a good communicator, if you withhold judgment, if you're calm in the face of change, your coworkers are going to notice. Think about who are the people that you want to work with on a day-to-day basis. It's not the jerks. It's the people who understand that we're all human beings and we're all fallible, right? And then if you know that you're in a supportive and trusting environment where your coworkers aren't going to jump down your throats immediately, you're going to be more willing to put your ideas out there. You're going to be more willing to take risks. You're going to be more willing to ask simple questions and difficult questions. The cycle builds and builds and continues, and that's what great teams do. Great teams build off one another. They solve problems creatively, and they make awesome things. But really, putting the T in team starts with you. You have to build a strong foundation. Without a strong I as its base, a T would just topple right over. You need to be a domain expert, but don't stop there. Cross your T. Empathy, communication, collaboration, curiosity, creative problem solving, adaptability. Now notice none of these things is a specific list of cross-domain knowledge points you have to go out and learn. I'm not saying learn about SEO. I'm not saying set up your own Apache server. I'm not saying create a pattern library. I think if you work on just developing these 6 traits in yourself, then all of that cross-domain knowledge that you need to survive today's world is just going to come naturally to you. You know, your curiosity is going to lead you to ask people questions. It's going to lead you to learn new stuff. You know, we need to put as much time and effort into developing quote-unquote soft skills as we put into the traditional hard front-end skills. And I would even say, I think the soft skills, they're harder. You know, it's not black and white. It's not cut and dry. Like, you have to step outside of yourself. You have to break yourself out of patterns that might have been ingrained in you for a really long time. But we can do it. Now, I'm not saying go out and be a unicorn. And by a unicorn, I mean someone who's an expert in everything. You know, true unicorns can like design and code in multiple language perfectly. You know, they're just as rare in our industry as they are in real life. So I'm not saying that we should aspire to knowing everything about everything. We should know a lot about our chosen field. We should be an empathetic and versatile collaborator and communicator on top of it. So I was like, all right, I'm saying don't be a unicorn. Like, what animal should you be instead? So first I thought like a dolphin. Like, they're super curious, they're cute, they're pretty awesome, but that doesn't really get the whole picture. Next I thought elephants. Elephants are really known for their empathy, but you know, are elephants really smart? I don't know. Then I started looking at omnivores. Did you know rats are omnivores? But who wants to be a rat? I don't know, not me. Sloths are super interesting. Sloths are also omnivorous. And did you know sloths like host colonies of green algae that has like a symbiotic relationship with their fur? I never knew. That's really cool. But the term sloth still has kind of a negative connotation, so nope. And then it hit me. The best type of animal to be is a human. Human beings, we're omnivorous, we're adaptable to any kind of terrain, we're the best communicators on the planet, we're the best innovators on the planet. Our brains evolved for empathy and collaboration. So in conclusion, don't be a unicorn, be a human being, be a T. Thank you. Oh, and that's the link to the slides on SlideShare.
Wow, thank you so much. That was such a good talk. Really, really good. Lots of questions, of course. I have one question. Immediately gonna cross the improv rule because I'm gonna say but. But what if you're in a team that's, I mean, I work a lot with teams that are actually rotten.
Yeah.
So what if you're in such a rotten team that's just the opposite of all the things that you're saying, but you want this team to change, but you're not the boss, let's say.
Right. So I've actually been in that situation myself, and this sounds like super cheesy, but I think you have to be the change you want to see in the world. I think go out and practice these things. You know, a lot of times when teams are rotten, it's because people have had really bad experiences in the past where they've put out a new idea and been shot down, or somebody's like made them feel like they're stupid if they ask a really simple question. And I think by like creating an environment where, you know, you're showing that that's kind of behavior isn't okay, then that can help encourage other people to do better. You know, like you can give this talk. The slides are out there.
Okay, so because I see many teams that now start, for instance, with I work with a development agency, and they see that they're as diverse as nothing. So they're completely not diverse. Only men and only white men.
Yes.
And they start seeing that as a problem, of course. And but there's quite a big team. So how do you change that? Or is it maybe better to start all over? Maybe.
I don't know. I think it's, you know, that's interesting because that gets into like your interviewing process a lot. Like a lot of interviewing processes are set up so that it's skewed towards people who are just like you. You know, you ask questions when you're talking to them that are trying to get at, like, do you have the same skills and experience that I have? Because that's what you know. So I think it starts in the hiring process and making sure that you are that you're trying to get at their skills. You're not finding out if they're like you. You're trying to find out who they are. I think another thing is like just working to collaborate and foster that kind of an environment. That kind of stuff gets out there into the wild. Like Etsy is known as being a really cool company. Like that's why I work for them. I didn't want to be a remote worker. I didn't want to have my office in New York and I live in Boston, but it was such a cool place and I knew that they were so committed to improving their diversity that I was like, I need to be a part of this.
So change job. Okay. That's
Come work at Etsy.
okay.
We're hiring a designer on my team.
Really good. So you know where to go. Okay, are there any questions in the audience? There must be some. Nobody.
I'm just that good at explaining it.
Yeah. Or they're good at working agile already here in
Yes.
Switzerland. There's a question over there. Good.
Thank you for this presentation. You talk a lot about agile, and from my experience, when companies understand by agile is always to implement methodologies like Scrum and this kind of stuff. And it's interesting because you speak a lot about the human factor.
Mm-hmm.
So how can we? What do you recommend? How we can push this side more?
Yeah, I think. So you're saying that. When you're building an agile team, you're focused more on the processes and not on the
Exactly.
people. Right. So I think one really good thing to do is to go to agilemanifesto.org and read through the principles and maybe like have a meeting where you all sit down together and talk about those principles and what do they mean. And I think iterating on Agile, Agile's great because it's like Agile all the way down. Like you can iterate on Agile as you're doing Agile. That's built into it. And maybe you can start by saying, okay, our daily stand-ups, right? We're not really getting at the point of a stand-up, which is to share what we're working on so that if we're blocked, somebody else on our team who might have a solution to help us can actually know that and jump in and help. I think refocusing what you say in your daily scrums is a really good start. I think also making sure that when you are having these meetings that you follow those active listening principles and make sure that you're saying, okay, what I'm hearing is this, what I'm understanding is this, because sometimes if you're doing in a retrospective and you're talking about what went wrong, it can get really contentious. So. Thank you. That was a great question.
And there's another thing I think with you work on products, right?
Well, I work on the stuff that the people who make products use.
Okay. So, but many of us work at agencies, so we have clients. Mm-hmm. I think clients are often a factor for the waterfall process. Mm-hmm. Can be a factor.
Yeah.
Any ideas about that? How we can? Because it is a lot about change, right? It's about
it is.
How
and
we've
people are
doing
terrified of change. That's a really good question. I would think that it starts by building a relationship with the client, and as with everything, if you prove yourself to someone, they're going to be more willing to trust you. So, maybe at first you have to kind of do a waterfall thing, but once the client learns that hey, we can trust these guys, they care, they do their work, maybe that's the time to talk about Agile and making a switch, is saying, frame it in the benefits to them. You're going to see working code much faster. It's not going to be you hand us a bunch of stuff and then you have to wait a year and then we'll give you something that's done. You'll get to see it grow and change and be built along the way. Framing things in how this is going to benefit them.
Okay. Any other questions? No more questions? I bet you have them, but you can ask them to Katie in person. She'll be around. Okay, thank you so much for a wonderful talk. Thank you.
Thank you.